Don on first, and as we go through here, Rand Schaffner knows a little bit about the history of Highlands, and we're going to have him share something less than the 700 pages, but we want to share a lot of this with everybody. So, starting with John Baumrucker, and after we make a toast to 150 years of Highlands. Happy anniversary, Highlands.
Everything he says is a lie.
Whether that was the peak or what, but and it was interesting. On one side of the hospital, right at the front, the snow was up to the eaves. On the other side, where that parking lot is, at the Crosby Center, now there was no snow at all, and that was typical going out into town. So Frank and I went out with catheter tubing and catheter bags and started to siphon gas out of cars if we could find them. I mean, we dug through some snow drifts and were sad to find no car there, but we continued until we got several bags of gasoline, filled up the gas tank for the generator, and we couldn't call anybody. After a while, the electricity went out, and the phones apparently have some battery backups that lasted for a while, and then they went out, and here we were, absolutely isolated from the rest of the world. But the generator, we had running water, we had heat. About midnight, we ran out of gas again, and Frank said, you know, over at the Community Bible Church, we have that van over there, and I just filled it up, he said. And so we went over there, and we got a little better. We got bigger jugs to put the gas in, but we still had to suck on the tube and get the gas going. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, we got back to the hospital and filled up the generator again. The police came, and I told the nurses to keep him busy. We went out and siphoned his gas tank.
To tell another story, but you remind me of one that that I'll tell instead, and then tell the other one a little later. But this is one of my stories don't come from my life here so much as lives that I have read about since, say, 1875 on the history of Highlands, and some of those stories I think are just as fascinating as anything I might present now. And what you've just done is reminded me of one of those. I think most of you know where Pearson Inn used to be on the corner of Satula and 4th and South Street. It's gone now. I think it was torn down around the 1950s or something like that. But and I ran Cyrano's bookshop, and the beauty of the bookshop is customers come in and they tell you all kinds of stories. And a lot of the stories in my book come from the stories that were told to me by customers who came in. That's what made it fascinating, not just selling books. But one person came in, there was a elderly lady, she was in her, I guess, almost in her 90s, who came in, and she came up to me and she said, I understand that you know a little bit of history about this place. And I said, well, a little bit. And she said, I want to ask you to help me to find the Pearson Inn. And I said, well, I can help you, I can show you I can tell you where the Pearson Inn was, where it was. I can't tell you where it is now because it's not there anymore. And she looked very, very sad, and I said, do you want me to take you and show you where it was? And she says, yes, if you would. And so I think Rosemary was running the store, and so I let her run the store, and I went on and walked up to the corner and stood there looking at the empty lot. And she stood there, and I watched her, And for a long time she was looking, and then I saw tears. She started crying. And I wasn't going to encroach on her thoughts. I just let her cry. And for a long while she was that way. And then I said, I hesitate to ask, but is this sad? Why are you crying over? I know the empty lot is gone now. I'm sorry. It's gone. And she says, well, I have to tell you. She says, I was here in the 1920s. Wait a minute. She says, my mother was here in the 1920s. And back then they used to all hike the Kelsey Trail and go up to Whiteside Mountain. I said, well, we're familiar with that. And she said, and that's a long walk to go all the way 5 miles up through the primeval forest and up on you can have a picnic up there, but then you've got to come 5 miles all the way back down. And people, if they didn't ride in an ox cart, they certainly walked. And she walked. And she walked all the way up there. And she got to the top, and they had the picnic. And as she was coming back down from the top, and she got to about the end of 5th Street, and her water broke. She was fully pregnant when she went up that mountain, if you think it's rough now, and came back down that mountain, and said they rushed her to the nearest place they could find, which was Pearson Inn. And she said, and I was born here at Pearson Inn. And I said, well, that's quite a story. That was about 1985 or somewhere along that. And I think it was the 1920s when she was born. Somewhere along in there. I don't know what they did, but Pearson Inn is where she was born.
Margaret Schaffner, okay, to everybody, and I came to Highlands generationally because I had a great aunt who had tuberculosis, and she came to Highlands for Dr. Lapham's treatment, and it is unfortunate that her treatment did not work on her. And when she died, she gave her house to her single sister, Eleanor. I have to think of her real name. And the house was where the post office is now. It was actually 2 houses. And then Eleanor decided that this was just too close to town. She was from Atlanta. It was just too close to town. So she bought a mountain outside of town and named it Brushy Face. And built a road and a shack at the top. There was no water at all, no plumbing, but she loved to come from Atlanta to stay at Brushy Face. And she got water from the Wilson children. Barney Wilson's children lived at the bottom of the mountain, and she paid them a penny a bucket for water all the way up that mountain to her shack.
Did they walk it?
They walked it. There was no other way. And they were thrilled. They were thrilled to have this income, you know. So then Aunt Eleanor, sold her house to my grandmother, where I came as a child. And there, at that house, Dr. Lapham came. All these people we hear about in history, the family interacted with all of them, and I heard various stories, some interesting and some not so interesting. And through it all, I began to realize that all of my family could only live in Highlands for the kindness of the locals. They really needed their support to enjoy this place. And I would go to Helen's Barn to square dance. I was a little girl. It was easy, you could just walk across the street. And everybody who knew my grandparents or knew my aunts would swing me off my feet, you know, around. And I learned to dance that way, swinging around. And I developed a love and a trust of the local people in Highlands who always supported us and had great wisdom. one woman who cooked for my grandmother lived in Blue Valley, taking care of her aging mother. And she walked from Blue Valley every day up the Buck Creek Road, down that road to the house in town where the post office is, and cooked all day for grandmother, and then walked home to take care of her mother. I mean, that was tough. That was tough.
About 6 miles.
Oh, and uphill. Yeah, uphill. Yeah.
Come up from Glen Falls.
She came up the Nat Ridge Road.
From Glen Falls.
From Glen Falls, yeah.
Came up
The
that
Nat Ridge Road right by, yeah. And later, Hazel moved to town. I adored Hazel. She moved to town and was the school cook and lived close to the school. So those are that enough stories? Yeah.
I have been lucky enough. My parents bought a house on Lake Glenville. I'm from Tampa, Florida, and I'm Nancy Turner. And my parents bought a house on Lake Glenville. It just was 4 walls 65 years ago. And it means more to me than anything in the world, because we had to work ourselves to build it, because you know how people don't show up, and especially during hunting season. But anyhow, I have 2 stories to tell. One, in I think it was either 1976 or 77, I came up here and I got to know a lot of the people that were hanging out here, some local, some out of town. And we played tennis and just hiked and had a good time together. And right here, where the Mountain Fresh is, next to it was a laundromat. Anybody remember that? Oh, yes. Do you remember what the name was?
Wash pot.
No, before that, it was the Wash-It.
Oh no.
And all of us, it was like the Navy SEALs had gotten together, because we had this, when all of us had talked about it, it was the topic of conversation for weeks at a time, but we were going to move the hyphen. And this became a real big thing. You know, you have to think about the logistics. We didn't have any cell phones, and that's a crossroads, so you had to have 2 people. We were going to go in the dark of night. We'd have 2 people on 5th Street, 2 people on Main Street, no cell phones, somebody to come in with a ladder. And so how were we going to communicate? We'd have to go, oh, oh, you know, you couldn't flash flashlights or anything of the police. Well, it went on, and then we chickened out. So it didn't happen, but it was a great thought it was no longer going to be the Wash-It, but the Was. Anyhow, the other story I have, that in 1969, I was going into my senior year in college. My brother had just graduated from high school. And a friend of mine who'd graduated, I went to Highlands, came through here, and she was going to see some people. And so I don't remember my parents being here, but they must have. But anyhow, we were trying to figure out how to entertain my friend Marietta, who was from Richmond. And you know, it was nothing to do, no TV. We did have movies, the movie theater, but at Helen's, everybody went to Helen's Barn, which was for, you know, square dancing and clogging and stuff like that. But I think they were trying to present a new image, and all of a sudden, all over town there appeared these posters, because there was going to be a wrestling match at Helen's Barn, and who would be in it but the Mass Marvel, who had a mask on it, and it was a tag team thing. And so we decided, oh, this is how we're going to entertain Marietta. So my brother and Marietta and I get there, and then I kind of chickened out, because I've seen wrestling matches on TV. We had a lot of wrestling in Tampa, and always somebody got thrown out of the ring. So I got there and I told my brother, I said, I'm not going in. I know you're going to get front row seats. I'm scared. I don't want to go in. So I paced around outside, and eventually I went in. And we're sitting there, and it was the hokiest thing I have ever seen. There was a real heavy-set girl on the far side, and she had her boyfriend with his head like this, and she was pounding him. She was really getting into this. I thought, this is terrible. And so we're sitting there. We look over, and here's the Mass Marvel in his mask. sitting in the corner. So we went over to talk to him, and it was real interesting. He had just been in Japan, and where he said wrestlers were like rock stars. They had to have bodyguards. And then he said, you know, everything they did was coordinated, and, you know, you had to be sure that you didn't hurt somebody or get hurt because that was your livelihood. So by then we just loved him. And so here comes the main event. Mass Marvel's tag team partner wasn't there, but somebody else was filling in. And so we're sitting there, you know, and I wasn't really paying attention. And somebody threw the Mass Marvel out of the ring, and this guy was big. I mean, he was like this, and he was probably about 6'3". And wouldn't you know, oh, I had been talking to these guys next to me. I'm from Tampa. They're from Tampa, so we had a conversation. And, you know, where are you from, and where'd you go to school, and stuff like that. But anyhow, the Mass Marvel gets thrown out of the ring, and right about that time, these rednecks, I don't know how it happened, but they came in. And if y'all remember the Highlands barn, which is still, by the way, there. It was up a hill, and they had putt-putt. Didn't they have putt-putt in the front? And it was a big slope. And then it was a big cavernous place, and they had bleachers up the side. And they had the wrestling ring in the middle and folding chairs on the front and back side. So the Mass Marvel's out of the ring. Rednecks come in. Somebody sucker punched Mass Marvel, and he accidentally, I was standing up, he accidentally hit me, and I am not, it could have been horrible. I went through 2 or 3 rows of chairs. I mean, I had bruises up and down my legs, and I'm like, I get up and I look over, and here's my friend Marietta with a folding chair over her head. She was going to take the next person that came near her out. I'm looking for my brother, and all I see is this rear end going through the window. And I mean, I told him later, I said, what were you doing? You didn't try to help us. He said, I knew you could take care of yourself. I just wanted to go over that guy at the gas station. I couldn't go around him, so I just went right over the top, out the window. And and then somebody pulls a knife. So the police are there, and it just goes on and on. So I see the only clear place, and I crawl in under the ropes and get in the ring. And I'm like leaning on the ropes, yelling, get in the ring, it's the only safe place. And so, you know, and so they, you know, the police get everybody, they get those guys arrested, and I sit back down, the guys from Tampa go, do you travel with them? And I said, no. And I'm not kidding you, you just can't make this up. 10 years later, I'm telling the story, and that worked for you. Her name was May, wasn't it? Or Meg? May. I was at May's parents' house, and her sister was married to this guy, and I'm telling the story, and he goes, oh my, it's like 10 years later. And he goes, oh my God, that was you? And I said, yeah. He said, I was there that night. That was the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. So anyhow, it was such a disaster. Highlands Barn never had another wrestling match.
When we first moved here, both of our boys had been taking allergy shots from an allergist, which is one step above a witch doctor, I think. And Chris had a sinus infection, so our first experience with a doctor in Highlands was with Dr. Mangum. And Mangum. Yeah, M-A-N-G-U-M. This was just, it's the practice that Patty has now. So she took Dr. Mangum's place. So it won't be that long. So we go in, and you sit down in Dr. Mangum's office, and he had his glasses down on his nose, sitting on one side of the desk, and you're in 2 chairs on the other side of the desk. And he looked across the desk at Christopher, who was 3rd grade then. He said, what's the matter with you, boy? He said, oh, back up. He had his glasses on his nose. He had a 6-ounce Coca-Cola in the bottle on his desk, and he had an unfiltered Chesterfield in his fingers. And he looked across the desk my son, "What's the matter with you, boy?" He said, "I'm allergic to cigarette smoke." He said, "Is that so?" And he was crusty, but he was a great diagnostician. He had no patience for anybody who just had pains and just got a headache. But boy, if you had a problem, he would get you out like that. So we had Dr. John for a number of years, and Dr. Mangum and Patty.
Years we worked together.
Yeah, he was quite a character. And one of these days, that's what we're going to say about you, John. You were quite a character.
One of these
But
days.
you're too young.
On to it. I'm going to tell you a real quick story. Something happened at my house today that triggered it. I have a hand knitted Afghan that's off-white with little pink roses on it. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, maybe I should take this with me tonight. I didn't bring it. I purchased that from the lady who made it. The lady who made it was Mrs. Edwards, who had the condiment shop on one of the corners that has now become OEI.